Sony's live service dream is quickly becoming a nightmare. Sony has one of the strongest reputations in gaming. Their name is synonymous with incredible single-player adventures. God of War, The Last of Us, Ghost of Tsushima, Spider-Man. These are titles that defined a generation. But lately it seems like they're addicted to lighting money on fire and chasing a dream that really doesn't fit them. Live service gaming. Concord has already crashed and burned. Marathon keeps slipping further into development hell. And their flashy new project Fairgames is already facing major problems after the creative director just walked away. And still, Sony insists this is the future. But is it really? Or is Sony's live service dream slowly becoming a nightmare? Let's dive into it. Let's start with Concord, the game that's quickly become the poster child for Sony's live service disaster. This wasn't some small project. Firewalk Studios started back in 2018. Sony acquired them in 2021 to help build what was supposed to be their first big step into the live service space. Concord had nearly 8 years of work, millions upon millions in funding, with estimates between $150 to $200 million, possibly even more. When it launched in 2024, this was supposed to be the big one, the hero-based shooter that would put Sony's live service dreams on the map. The trailers promised colorful characters, flashy worlds, and a universe players could invest in. But when players actually got their hands on it, the reality was painfully different. The characters felt flat, the gameplay was generic, and the entire thing had that uncomfortable, corporate trying to be cool vibe that really people sniffed out quickly. And the results were catastrophic. Concord sold only around 25,000 copies, peaking at just 697 concurrent players on Steam, with PlayStation numbers barely passing 1,300. And critics weren't kind either. It currently sits at about 62 on Metacritic, with a horrific 1.7 user score. The community reaction was brutal as well. Reddit threads compared the cast to a knockoff Saturday morning cartoon, and others described it as woke and trying too hard. Players joked that Concord wasn't a live service, it was a live funeral service. Some even said they knew it was doomed the moment they saw the trailer. And the worst part was that they weren't wrong. Within 2 weeks, yes, 2 weeks, Sony announced it was pulling Concord from sale, refunding everyone and shutting down the servers. Firewalk Studios was closed shortly after, and years of work, hundreds of millions of dollars, all gone in 14 days. If that's not enough to make you question Sony's strategy, let's look at Marathon. On paper, this one should have been different. Bungie knows live service. They built Destiny, one of the only real long-term success stories in the space. A reboot of their classic franchise should have been a slam dunk. Instead, development has been rocky from the start. Marathon has been in the works for over 4 years with a team of more than 300 developers, but delays keep piling up. Internal reports mention shifting visions, morale issues, and even scandals, like the plagiarized artwork being discovered in the early builds of the game. Sony recently pushed the release back indefinitely, admitting publicly that their live service strategy, quote, isn't going smoothly. Another wrinkle in all this is Bungie itself. When Sony first acquired them, Bungie was promised a level of independence that set them apart from other PlayStation studios. But that wall is starting to come down. Following a round of structural reform, Sony's CFO admitted that Bungie's independence is getting lighter, and the studio is gradually being folded more into the PlayStation studios. And that should honestly be a red flag. When even Bungie, PlayStation's big $3.6 billion bet, can't get a project out the door, it says a lot about how broken their strategy really is. And then we get into Fairgames. This was meant to be Sony's stylish, heist-based multiplayer game from Haven Studios, led by industry veteran Jade Raymond. On paper, it looked like a flashy co-op experience about robbing banks and corporations with your friends, but right away the community wasn't buying it. Early previews called it generic and clunky, and fans said it felt just like another shooter in the market already flooded with them. Then came the red flags. Haven's founder, Jade Raymond, left earlier this year, and just recently the game's creative director walked away after more than 4 years on the project. That's 2 leadership exits before the game is even launched. For a game that was supposed to be one of Sony's big new pillars, that's the kind of news that makes people wonder if it'll even survive long enough to release. Back in 2022, then CEO Jim Ryan promised that Sony would deliver 12 live service titles by 2025. But here we are. Most of them are dead before they even got off the ground. 7 have already been canceled. One of them was Concord. 3 are supposedly still in development, and the only one that's actually succeeded is Helldivers 2. That means Sony has effectively canceled 2/3 of the games they swore were the future. When you put it all together, the picture isn't just bad, it's alarming. Concord dead in 2 weeks after years of development, hundreds of millions of dollars. Marathon, from Bungie of all studios, stalled in development limbo. Fairgames bleeding leadership and struggling to win players over before it even launches. These are games that Sony pinned their live service hopes on, and right now every single one of them looks more like a warning sign than a success story. And the response from leadership hasn't been to rethink the strategy, but to reframe it. Herman Holst, head of PlayStation Studios, recently said, quote, "The number doesn't really matter. What matters is, quote, a a diverse set of player experiences and communities. In other words, it's not about how many live service games Sony pushes out, but about failing smarter, failing easier, and failing cheaper. But the irony is that Sony didn't need to abandon their strategy in the first place. The PS4 era was defined by blockbuster single-player exclusives like Bloodborne, God of War, and The Last of Us. Games so strong that they reshaped the console war and left Xbox and Microsoft scrambling. Sony's track record shows that single-player excellence still works, which makes this gamble of live service feel even riskier and really doesn't make much sense. If you're enjoying the video thus far, be sure and subscribe to the channel. It'd be greatly appreciated. Now, let's get back into it. However, there is one exception to what we're discussing today, and that's Helldivers 2. Helldivers 2 stands as the rare success story in Sony's live service experiment, a shining example that shows that it can work but only under the right circumstances. When it launched in February 2024, no one expected it to blow up the way that it did, but within weeks it had sold over 8 million copies and surged past 400,000 concurrent players on Steam, making it one of PlayStation's biggest multiplayer hits ever. The reasons why it succeeded are the exact reasons games like Concord failed. Concord was marketed around its characters, trying to sell you on personalities and lore that didn't exist yet. Helldivers 2 went in the exact opposite direction. It just threw you and your friends into the chaos of an intergalactic war, gave you a set of absurdly powerful tools, and told you to fight against endless waves of alien bugs and robots. The gameplay loop is where Helldivers 2 thrives. Missions are unpredictable, filled with moments of both triumph and disaster. Sometimes in the same minute, a single mistake can wipe out an entire squad, often in the most hilarious way possible thanks to friendly fire and chaotic physics. These stories, the failed extractions, the heroic last stands, the accidental betrayals, became the fuel for the game's word of mouth. People didn't just play Helldivers 2, they shared it, they memed it, they made it part of gaming culture. And then there's the live service element itself. Unlike Concord or Fairgames, Helldivers 2 didn't feel like a shallow excuse for microtransactions. Arrowhead built a community-driven game where every player's actions mattered, with fronts shifting and enemies adapting based on collective performance. Updates felt like genuine events, not tricks to keep you grinding, but moments that actually expanded the game's world. This is what Sony's other projects missed. Concord asked players to commit to a world that wasn't compelling. Marathon has been stuck in delays, losing momentum before it even arrives. And Fairgames feels more like a concept than a game, with really, I think, only one real trailer. But Helldivers 2 nailed the formula. It started with fun, unpredictable gameplay, added a community layer that gave players a reason to care, and then only layered in live service elements that felt natural instead of forced. It shows that their live service success isn't impossible, but it isn't something you can just manufacture with money, slick trailers, or big names. It has to grow from the kind of experience players actually want to come back to, and that's something Sony needs to remember if it wants to keep chasing live service. But in my opinion, that is not Sony's true strength. While Sony struggles to force its way into live service, it's worth stepping back and asking, do they even need to do it? Because when you look at the last decade of PlayStation, the answer seems obvious. Sony's biggest successes haven't come from live service experiments, they've come from unforgettable single-player adventures, games that we've all loved, games that I have had so much fun with. These are games that don't ask for a daily login or a battle pass, they don't demand hundreds and hundreds of hours of repetition, they simply deliver world-class storytelling and polished gameplay that stays with you for a very long time. And it's not just critical acclaim either. These games dominate sales charts, rack up Game of the Year awards, and become gaming icons. God of War Ragnarok sold 11 million copies in just 3 months. I mean, that is absolutely insane. Spider-Man 2 cleared 5 million in its launch week. These are numbers most live service games could only dream of, and they did it without a grind, without endless monetization hooks, and without trying to compete with Fortnite or Call of Duty for your time. And that's the key difference. Sony's single-player hits feel essential. They're experiences that you need to try, the kinds of games that define why you bought a PlayStation in the first place. And this is where Sony risks losing sight of who they are. Microsoft has carved out a nice space with Game Pass and service-driven accessibility. Nintendo thrives by reinventing its iconic franchises again and again. Meanwhile, Sony became king by delivering single-player blockbusters. That's their lane, that's what players expect. And when they chase live service instead, it feels like they're ignoring their greatest strength and trying to copy someone else's playbook. It's like asking Gordon Ramsay to stop making fine dining and start working at McDonald's. Sure, he could do it, but it kind of misses the point of why he's a famous chef. But Sony's live service troubles are really just part of a much bigger industry problem. Over the last decade, publishers everywhere have been chasing the forever game, the kind of live service that dominates player time and prints money like Fortnite or Destiny or Call of Duty Warzone. But for every one of those success stories, there are dozens of games that have just failed and crashed and burned. Look at EA's Anthem. It was hyped up as the next big sci-fi franchise, developed by BioWare with a massive budget. Within months, it collapsed under broken promises and repetitive gameplay. EA eventually canceled its full reboot in 2021, writing off years of hard work and tens of millions of dollars. Or let's take Ubisoft's Hyperscape. Launched launched in 2020, dead in less than 2 years. Rumbleverse, gone in 6 months. Even Microsoft poured years into Halo Infinite's live service model, only to watch player counts plummet as fans grew tired of thin updates. Meanwhile, single player and narrative driven games are thriving. Elden Ring sold over 20 million copies by offering a gorgeous world that rewarded exploration. Baldur's Gate 3 swept Game of the Year awards in 2023, proving there's still a massive hunger for premium one and done experiences, or single player games that you can just come back and play again and again. These are games that people talk about, celebrate, and remember, and it's the exact space where Sony already dominates. And that's why Sony's obsession with live service feels so misguided. Sony's live service dream was supposed to carry them into the future, but when you look at the reality, the dream looks more like a nightmare. The one bright spot is Helldivers 2, which proved that Sony can make a live service game work, but Helldivers 2 is lightning in a bottle, a game that exploded because it was fun, hilarious, and community driven in ways that felt authentic. Only a handful of games have managed to keep players coming back year after year. Most others just fade within months. Sony already has something that sets them apart, the best single player experiences in the industry. If anything, doubling down on that strength seems like a far less gamble than being in a crowded market where live service success is rare and failure is truly the norm. So here's the question: what should Sony do in the future? Should they keep chasing this live service dream, hoping for another Helldivers 2 moment, or should they focus on what made them great in the first place? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And if you want proof of how dangerous this live service gamble can be, check out my most recent video on 10 games that died immediately at launch. Most of them were live service titles, rushed out, poorly planned, and abandoned within months. It's the same risky formula Sony is risking their future on. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.